Morning. So for those of you who may be unfamiliar with CISA, is anybody in the room unfamiliar with CISA? A couple hands. And can you hear me okay in the back? There's a mic here, but I'm not holding it. Great. So if you're unfamiliar with CISA, we serve as the United States lead cyber defense agency, emphasis on the word defense, and the national coordinator for critical infrastructure, resilience, and security. We manage the effort to understand and reduce the risk to cyber and physical systems and infrastructure that Americans rely on all the time. Essentially, we just work to protect those networks and devices. And we work with partners across the private sector and the public sector and nonprofits and international partners to coordinate response to emergencies and prepare for what to do when bad things do happen in software and digital spaces. And for those of you who don't know me, well, I also didn't start my career thinking I would ever work in security or in the government. But I did understand early on that society advances faster when we collaborate. And as a hacker in the 90s, going to college and studying physics and computer science, I saw the beginning of open source as the court cases were happening in the US around encryption, and as the OSI and the free software definition were being written. And well, I just got involved back then and have kept working in it ever since. So super happy to be here and see a whole lot of new people getting involved as well. Ultimately, that collaboration over the past 20, 30 years in open source software has given us all faster and more efficient innovation and technological transformation globally and connected us all. But because that growth over that time has outpaced education about open source, especially in the past 10, 15 years, we now need to address some of the risks that have emerged from misaligned incentives. Has everyone heard of this old maxim from back then that software is more secure if it's open source because more people have reviewed it? That was a great meme back then for why it was better, especially true for the core projects, the larger projects that had a lot of attention, and is still true today for many. But I think we need to consider the corollary that given too few eyes, all software contains bugs. And today, there's more software being written than people who have time to review it. That is a problem. We are all incredibly fortunate that one volunteer, and then working with others, was able to spot the XZ exploit. And the community rallied to fix it and address it. But where there used to be a lot more people performing that kind of analysis and benchmarking and peer code review, there are now a lot more projects with only one maintainer and no one looking at the code. And the investment in secure development process in open source is not aligned to the criticality of the project and how wide its dependency trees are. Software manufacturers need to contribute back a little bit more of the value they're getting from volunteers and from the ecosystems in which the larger collaboration efforts are happening. And additionally, I think software manufacturers need to put aside notions of profit-motivated insecurity. And this might seem like a bold statement to many, but for too long now, we've seen companies withholding security essential capabilities and using open source as a lead to generate sales. That serves as a detriment to anyone who's using that open source and doesn't understand the paradigm behind it. So our goal at CISA, we recognize that working with the open source community will be quite different than how governments work typically with companies. Part of why they hired me was to help share that knowledge around the government. And it's quite different. And there are some unique complexities that emerge also from open source's global nature, and that we are all working to resolve, to understand, and to build into how CISA is engaging here. So our goal is to lead by example, to steer our resources in ways that encourage secure by design outcomes for open source and for all the products and services that depend on open source. By encouraging responsible usage of open source, which implies sustainable contribution back to sustain the projects that companies depend on. and that governments depend on, from across both private and public sector. So the update to share today is that we are currently working again with the Science and Technology Directorate at DHS through their Silicon Valley Innovation Program to help directly fund the development of a new capability in open source. Some of you may remember Protobomb. I think one of the opening slides was one of the companies, the open source project by a company that was awarded through the same program last year. This year, the funding is going to startups that are building software artifact dependency graph generation capabilities. And this sounds a little bit, I guess, another quick show of hands. Who's heard of the concept of a directed acyclic graph or a Merkle tree? Most hands. That's how Git works under the hood. This, in principle, is applying the same technique instead of to one code repository over time, to open source build chains across the full, ideally, full transitive dependency graph of very complex, heterogeneous open source supply chains. And there are some open source projects out there already using this kind of technology. Bazel, Nix, and Omnivore, formerly known as Gitbomb. And there may be others out there that we're not yet familiar with. There may be new ones that you have in mind and want to start. This program provides up to $1.7 million in non-dilutive funding to startups that qualify. There's terms and qualifications up there that I won't try to summarize for you right now, from anywhere in the world. So European startups, by all means, please also apply. The goal of this is two-part. Startups would need to use this money to help generate and create and contribute this capability into open source core tools. That might be something like the GCC suite. It might be into Cargo for Rust. It might be into Docker. And to find a way to commercialize this capability once the data is being created by the build tools, once the graph of transitive dependencies becomes available, find ways to connect it and improve security response times or incident response times. Maybe that means connecting it to CVE or to SBOMs through Protobomb or something else. So if you work at a company that might have something in this space already or an interest in this space, we'd love to hear from you. I hope you can join us in California in October or send in an application by by mid-December, and I'll be around if you want to chat. You can also always reach out to us, open source at CISA, or find out more. There's a whole lot more work we've done in the past 9 months related to the roadmap I had up. I don't have time today to go into all of the stuff we've done, but you can read about it and find out more at cisa.gov/OSS. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Aeva.